Hey everybody, welcome to this week's live chat. We're going to be chatting about the wood grain, and I know that there have been a lot of questions and comments already in the live chat before I went live with the video. Just a reminder, if you come onto the link about a half an hour before the video goes live, I'm actually on there texting and answering questions. Quick little questions if I can answer them, or I just address them during the live chat. So if you have a couple extra free minutes, it's a great option to try that. So the Free Motion Challenge Quilting Along kicked off yesterday, and oh my gosh, you guys, I am loving the energy and the pictures and just that camaraderie that's coming out of it. I love it so much. We have quite a bit of first-time, we'll call it challengers, and I love that because I think it's just a great way to jump in and learn how to do something. We'll try difficult stuff if we can do it with other people. So by participating in the challenge, you get to, learn, but also get to cheer each other on. And so I'm just really excited about how this has already kicked off, and I think it's going to be a great 6 weeks. So I have a little presentation for you about the wood grain design. I'll be showing some tips and pictures and little things, little nuggets that I couldn't quite make it into the video. And I'll answer your questions and then check back and forth and make sure you're doing good on the live chat. So first of all, if you remember, today was the big way of the Flora and Foliage quilt that I quilted for the challenge, and Denise Ers is the lucky winner. I've already emailed her. She's already emailed back. So good, congratulations, Denise, and we will definitely be having a giveaway every week right here on the live chat. So super excited. Although I did tell Denise you're going to have to bind it because it's not bound, but I think she's fine with that, so it'll work. A couple things before we get started. As always, the Free Motion Challenge quilting alongs are free. There's no cost to participate, but you can purchase the exclusive products if you want to quilt along with me on the same quilt. I know that a lot of you have placed orders and you're still waiting on them. I'm so sorry, we're waiting on fabric, but as soon as it comes, we will cut it and get it sent right out to you. So I know it's frustrating, but thank you for your patience. We have been working very, very diligently the last 3 weeks trying to stay on top of orders. So great problem to have, but the fabric should be here any day and then we'll get it out, I promise. So thanks again for your patience on that. Okay, so before we go into the pictures, I just want to talk real quick about how you approach the wood grain design, whether you're on a sewing machine or a long arm. And this is something that I really wanted to work in the video, but it just didn't quite have time. I try to keep those videos within a certain range of time. So if I'm quilting this design, the wood grain design, on a sewing machine, I might approach it slightly differently than I would on my long arm. So on a sewing machine, let's pretend I'm doing this over the whole quilt, right? This is going to be an edge to edge all over design. Well, we know that on a sewing machine, we can start anywhere we want. What I would do is I would start with my first wavy line down the center of the quilt. Right, so that first wavy line is what we're building off of, and putting it in the center is just an easy way to start at the hardest part. So in my mind, I like to start in the center because I'm like, okay, it's never going to be heavier than it is right now, and then that way as I go, it gets a little bit easier. After I quilt that center line, I would build off of one side of it, doing exactly what the tutorial showed you, adding the knots and your wood grain stuff, and then I would finish that whole half out and then come back and do the other side. Now, does that mean that's how you have to approach it? Definitely not. That's just how I do it. I am only the expert of my opinion, but that's kind of how I'd go about it. Now, on this particular challenge, if you're quilting along with me on the panel, we're filling in a defined area that's kind of weird shaped. We're going to talk about that here in a second. But I started with my wavy line towards the center of that area and then built off of both sides of it. So the main idea is I want to make sure I have enough space to get that line nice and wavy. If I do it too close to one of the edges, it gets a little tricky. So let's contrast that with on the long arm. So when I'm quilting this on the long arm, I'm working top down. I'm thinking horizontally. There is no, starting wherever you want. You start at this spot and you work your way down. So in this particular panel, we're starting at the very top. I'm still going to do my wood grain to fill in that area, but I'm going to start my first line about an inch or two below the edge of the quilt. So I'm not going to start right at the seam. I'm going to come down just a little bit and then do my line. Then I'll fill in that little gap above it and then continue on underneath it. So it seems a little crazy, right? Or not quite maybe obvious why I do that at first. Again, this design builds off that first wavy line. If I come down a little bit, I'll have plenty of space to go ahead and get that going, and then I can work on either side of it. So that's why I don't do it too close to a seam, because I'm just going to add some more echo lines and fill it in. But if you've watched this video tutorial, you know what's the most important thing, that we fill in all the gaps. That's it. The biggest struggle with this design with most quilters that I have taught is that quilters will give up too quickly on it. You can't quilt a couple lines and think, oh, it doesn't look good. You got to keep going, you got to keep going, you got to keep going until the whole thing is filled in. Then you can step back and look at that beautiful texture. And that's what I think is so fun about this challenge. I'm hearing a lot of that on the Facebook group, on the YouTube video, and on the live chat. Like, oh my gosh, it looked great when I was done. So super proud of everybody for doing that. If that doesn't make sense about how I approach a quilt or approach the design differently on each quilt, I'll try to put together a little video explaining, but hopefully it gives you an idea of how I went about it. All right, real quick, I'm going to show you some pictures and we're going to talk through this design. I'm going to show you some variations, and then I'm also going to talk about next level stuff. So I know we have a lot of beginners, and if I mention something that seems like over your head or you're not quite sure what I'm talking about, just know that you can do it eventually. This will be more for the quilters that have done a couple challenges and are ready for something a little bit more difficult. No, I'm just kidding. There's nothing difficult, just a couple things to think about. All right, so like I said, this week we did the wood grain design. Love it, such a beautiful texture. And we're going for curvy, moving design. And this particular design, what I love about it is you can use it in so many different ways, right? So, and I'm going to show you some different options for it. But like I said, what's the most important part? Filling in everything as much as possible. So that's the most important part. So if you're quilting along with me on the panel, we're filling in the section highlighted in red with the wood grain design. And there were a lot of questions about this. And I did not specifically say this in the video, which is why I love doing the live chats, because I can make sure it makes sense. So as I'm quilting that section, I'm actually quilting my wood grain the same direction all the way down. So in the top, I have a really long area to do that. But then when I get to the side, it just gets shorter and you know, same direction. Now you can turn the corners, and I saw that some of you did turn the corner, as what I mean is like went vertical and then turned and went horizontal. Totally fine. I didn't even want to get into that because that's a little bit tricky to explain to some newer quilters. But going the same direction is key, especially if you're doing it on the long arm, because quilting this design vertically is tricky when you have to advance in between each line. So that's the area that we're filling in. But there was a great question. See if I have the name. Don't have the name, but the question was, how many designs are we going to learn? Because this person isn't quilting on the panel and they want to know how many sections they should make. So we're going to be doing 6 different sections. So if you're not quilting along on the panel, no problem. Grab 6 fat quarter sandwiches or grab a UFO you have laying around and just have it kind of decide the 6 areas that you're going to fill in. Even though we're learning variations of a design, so for instance, next week we're going to be learning the leafy meander and some other variations. They'll all go together, so you can still fill in that area with the design. Okay, so let's talk about the steps of this. Now, these are all in the tutorial, the video that you saw, but I'm just going to kind of reiterate them for you. The first line that you quilt is what builds off. Your rest of your design builds off that first wavy line. And how do you like it when I say, don't make it too wavy or too flat? Ugh, that's not very specific, is it? But I didn't want to put a number on it. Just give you an example, if it's too flat, it's going to be really hard to find those hills to add our knots into. And if it's too wavy, it's going to be too small to fit in a knot, right? So a nice, gently wavy line. Now, there were some great questions on the chat before we started. Can you mark out the line before you start? Absolutely. Whatever it takes, you know, to get you comfortable with that. You can also use a wavy ruler if you wanted to. So if you had a wavy ruler that had that nice repeating wave, perfect. You can quilt out that first line and then freehand the rest. Or I guess you could try using your ruler too, but it's really easy to freehand. One of the questions though that came up on the chat was, well, won't it be too regular? Will it look too perfect? Now, once you fill in the rest of that area, you probably won't even notice where you started. So you can do all of that to get that first line kind of down. Now, in the video, there's a link to quilting diagrams that you can download, and it will kind of give you an example of what I'm talking about. So here's an example of the line is not wavy enough. So this is where I was kind of troubleshooting for you. What happens is if we're not adding our knots or we're not starting off with a wavy enough line, it'll tend to flatten out. So that's okay, no problem. What you're going to do in that situation is you're going to start over. You're going to travel down a couple inches and then quilt another wavy line, kind of like a redo or a restart. But we're going to have a gap, right? So if I have my flatter quilting up here, my nice beautiful wavy line, I want to fill in that gap between those two before I move on. And I'm going to put echo lines, or I'm going to put some serpentine lines. It doesn't matter what you put in there. Just try to keep the spacing somewhat consistent with the rest of the design, and I promise you it's going to just blend in. And let's be honest, if you did it once, it's probably going to happen again. So at that point, it just becomes a design feature of your quilt. So try not to stress too much, but you just want to start over, get that first line down, fill it in, and then move on. And that's something that, you know, we all have to do to get in the rhythm of it. It's a lot easier to do that than to struggle with trying to turn that straight line into a wavy line. And it is possible, but it's just a lot easier to start over and fill in the space. So hopefully that makes sense to everybody. That's one of the most common issues that quilters see. So I'm kind of going over troubleshooting things right now, because you could do everything that I say and you might think, well, it doesn't look right. Well, that could be one of it. Maybe your lines are flattening out. Again, it looks fine, no problem, but the waviness just makes it a little bit easier to see where you're going to put in those wood grains. Okay, troubleshooting number two, or number one, next one, not keeping the knots of your design close to that previously quilted line. Okay, so by the way, these pictures and these illustrations are straight out of the expanded resource diagrams if you purchase those. But here's the thing. If we want to keep the spacing consistent, we don't want any gaps, right? Because our eyes are drawn to a gap or a difference in the quilting. So if that knot tends to angle away from that first wavy line, as I come out and go back into my wave, I'm going to end up with a gap in that area. Okay, so if that happens, I'm just going to stop, add a few wavy lines, and then, you know, echo lines or whatever, and keep going. But if I just always keep that point of the knot close to that wavy line, it's going to help kind of fill in all those gaps. Okay, so then here is the next question that came up. So some people were noticing that they were having trouble keeping their lines kind of straight-ish. You know, so if they're on a sewing machine quilting vertical, they felt like they started to lean. It's okay. Even if your knots are leaning one way or the other, it's fine. I really don't think it's a big deal. I'll talk about how to maybe fix that here in a second, but your knots don't have to be perfectly vertical or horizontal. They can angle, and that's what's going to help you fit it in. So really try to focus on keeping that point or that edge of your knot close to that previously quilted line. But Shay asked, you know, why is it a pointed wood grain? She didn't ask that. Shay asked, can you make it more of a swirl? So if you've ever looked at wood grain quilting designs, it's definitely nothing unique to me. It's a beautiful texture that a lot of people teach and use. I like to do the pointed wood grain because it fills in the area. So there are some beautiful swirly type wood grains, which I guess would be more actually like a wood grain. But with those swirls and those wavy lines, you tend to get more gaps. And I really like the whole thing filled in as much as possible. But you can definitely experiment with different shapes in here. You can try circles, you can try other shapes, but really the pointed ends and the wider middle is what's going to kind of keep that wave going. And I just love how it fills in the area as much as possible. But remember, it's not the size of your knot that determines the density of your design. It's the spacing between your lines. So you might think, why do I keep saying that? Because I think I said it in the video, and I'll probably say it a couple more times before we're done. When you're making your knot, don't worry that they're all the same size, and don't even worry how many times you echo on to the inside. Just try to keep the spacing consistent, and it's going to be fine. That was another question that came up, was really good. It was said, is a space between the lines of your knot supposed to be the same as a space between your wavy lines? So that came up in the live chat just before we started, or the text chat before we started. For the most part, yeah, I want them to be somewhat similar, but sometimes I might not leave myself enough room to get out. Sometimes my lines get a little bit closer on the knots, and that's okay. I just don't want any gaps. I'd rather just have them a little closer if I need to and then not have any gaps. So again, if you're just trying to quilt a wavy line and you're just trying to quilt without peeing your pants, don't worry about this stuff. Just quilt it and move on. It's going to look great. But if you're wanting to refine it, if you're wanting, to make it look a little bit better, not saying it doesn't look good now, these tips will definitely help. Okay, and then the last one, not making your knots round enough. So what happens is sometimes it's scary to quilt out into that space, right? So we'll go up to our point and then we need to swoop down. Especially in a class setting, quilters have a hard time really kind of going out into that space because it's a little scary, but you really need to make them nice and round because that's what's going to help continue the wavy line, right? So if I add my knot by having it swoop down is going to kind of create that wave for the next couple of rows. And it doesn't matter how, or how big you quilt it, because it's the spacing that determines the density. So try not to be scared about that. Try to really kind of force yourself to go out there. And I think you'll find it works out better, because you need to leave yourself room to work your way back out. Now, I did say this in the video, but I didn't really put it in here. It doesn't have to be symmetrical. I think sometimes when quilters are quilting a design, they get really caught up on the perfection of things, and you can't. There's no such thing as perfection in free motion quilting, and definitely not in the wood grain. We're just going for a shape that's wider in the middle and pointier at the ends. Whether it's the same or it curves around or looks silly, that's really that slight change of slight change of shape is what gives it the interest of the design. You also don't have to add tons of knots. You can add just a few. If you're a little nervous about it, it's your first time quilting, quilt 4 or 5 wavy lines and then throw a knot in and then go back to the wavy lines. But once you get the hang of it, you can add more of them as you go. So you can definitely make this fit your preferences and get to a place where you're comfortable with it. All right, so how do we use the wood grain design? I'm a huge believer that it's one thing to know how to quilt a design. It's a completely different thing to know where and what to use it on. What kind of quilt? Where should you use it? Well, there's some different ways that you can use this design. First, as an all-over edge to edge, especially if you're working with more intricately pieced quilts. The perfect thing that comes to mind is Elizabeth Hartman patterns with her cute little animals, and I think the wood grain looks great on that because it's a nice, beautiful texture without taking away from all that intricate piecing. So over the whole quilt or even larger areas of the background. Now, in this example, I have some patchwork going on here, and I just wanted just a nice texture over all of it. I didn't necessarily want to pull out a single block, but you can. So another way you can use it is as a partial all over or in large background areas. This is one of my favorite tricks. So you can use it to highlight certain blocks of your quilt while kind of just giving the rest of it a nice all over texture. And let's see what that looks like. Oh, this is the same quilt. I just kind of selectively picked where I showed you the pictures. So with this quilt, I decided to highlight a few of the blocks with some different piecing. So you can see right in the center that has a motif that pulls it together. It has some dot to dot, even some echoing, just in case you're wondering. It's like, hey, check this out. So, and I just picked them randomly, but this would be an example of what I would do if the block was my favorite block, or the block I actually pieced well, or it has my fabric that, my out of print fabric that I just love. By doing something different in that area, it's really going to make it stand out. And then I can do that wood grain all over in the background, and it's just going to give it that nice texture. What's also going to do, it's really going to help draw the eye to it, since those lines are just kind of running right into it. Now, all I'm doing here is I still have my defined area, right? Except this time it's the side of a block and the side of a quilt. Still the same. I'm going to show you another example of that here in a second. But really great way to highlight certain blocks on your quilt without doing custom quilting over the whole quilt. And this is the back view of that quilt, and that probably gives you a little bit more of an example of what it looks like. So as you can see, I have that block there, and I have a couple blocks up here well, that defined area is in the regular shape, but you can see in there, all I did was travel along the edge once I ran into it, and then echoed my way back out. So that's pretty much the same thing. We just have to kind of wrap our minds around the idea that we're traveling in different directions, not always straight up and down. Another way you can use it is as a filler. So again, this is going to be for those that want to really make something pop on their quilt, those of you that feel more comfortable with the design or machine quilting in general, because now we're going to be traveling around curves in different shapes. So let's pretend I quilted these 2 feathers and I'm super proud of them. I did the feather challenge, and so I feel comfortable with them. I'm like, yes, I want to show them off. Putting this wood grain in between them is going to be the perfect contrast to make them pop. Now, the reason it works is because it's going a different direction. I'm going to be quilting it horizontally where those feathers are going vertically, but I'm also going to be making it really dense. So it's going to be lines are really close together. It's really very, very, very quilted. Not something I would do in a quilt I don't love, or for a quilt for somebody I don't love, but definitely in an area where I really want to show something off. So this is how it started. I was just quilted my sample, and then now I have my defined area, except now it's kind of scalloped because it's between those feathers, but it's no problem. I'm still quilting, and as I run into the edge, wherever that is, and here it happens to be that leaf or that part of my feather, I'm going to travel and continue on. This is really important. It might seem kind of not important, but if I were to come to a point and then come right back out, it will build up weird. Like it'll be build up in the center and not so much on the outside. Traveling is what's going to really keep that design progressing nicely. So I'm traveling and just trying to fill in the whole area. So here's a couple more pictures, just shows you the progress in the steps in between, just kind of show you how it comes together. And there you can see how it's really just a lot of traveling, but it's really starting to smash that down and make that quilting pop. And there was a great question that was asked earlier. The question was, when I'm preparing for a challenge, do I quilt the quilt on my long arm or my sewing machine? And I start on my long arm just because it's faster, and I love playing with different samples and examples and kind of thinking about what I'm going to show. And so this was me preparing my mind for what I wanted to teach. So definitely as a filler, and there you go, you can see the finished result. Now, of course, this is showing off, right? This is when I really want the quilting to, be dense, but you don't have to quilt it that way. You can do it however you like. So whether you do it all over the whole quilt or you just shrink it way down and use it to smash down an area to make those feathers pop out, it's a very versatile design. Okay, so let's talk about variations. Now, when you can learn one design and then 10 different ways to quilt it, it's a lot easier than learning 10 different designs. So let's look at the first variation where we're kind of creating pods. And these pods are going to be filled with a different filler. Now, this particular example, this variation, isn't so much about the all over texture. It's really going to draw your eyes to where those pops of design are. So this is not something I would do in a busy fabric where you can't see the quilting anyway. Or this isn't something I would do on a quilt where maybe I didn't love it. This is going to be what I put in areas that I want to draw attention to, right? This is going to really pull attention. So maybe these go in the border of my quilt and the rest is just a wood grain. But what I'm doing is everything is the same. I'm still quilting my wavy line. I'm still creating that, that first part of my arc or for my knot, but the main difference is I'm closing it off. And you can see at the bottom there, I'm coming in and I'm running in to that wavy line. So I'm defining another area. Now, what's fun about this is some quilters will find this variation a lot easier. So if you're thinking, oh, I've already been running into that line, perfect. You're just way ahead of the rest of us. But once I have that area defined, then I'm going to fill it in, working my way to the opposite side. Here's the thing. You want to make sure that pod is big enough that you have room to fill it in. Don't do little teeny ones because you'll drive yourself crazy adding the filler in there. So making it big enough will give me enough space to add those different textures. And what you put in that pod is totally up to you. And that was one of the questions that came up. What filler should you use in this variation? Well, the only filler I wouldn't use would be any kind of wavy line. So you could do a serpentine line in there if you wanted. It just wouldn't pop out very much. It would kind of blend in. So if you're practicing serpentine lines, that might be a good thing. But in this particular example, I just did some different ones. There's ribbon candy, there's pebbles, there's swirls, there's wishbones, and I just kind of alternated the ones that I use. One thing that's going to make this look really nice is to make sure you have a lot of echo lines in between your pods, because that kind of separates it and really kind of makes it look like it's kind of just interwoven in there. And again, you can experiment with different shapes and make these as big or as small as you like. Another variation that you can do is you can combine these with the wood grain and you can change up the placement. So this is where we can really start having fun. So, but this particular example, I did the wood grain and then in every row, I added a pop of that texture, one of those variations, except I placed them out so that they make a secondary design. So they're kind of moving in that vertical or that diagonal line. So why did I do that? Well, first of all, I'm easily amused and I thought it looked like fun. Another reason could be maybe I'm using that secondary pattern in the background to really pull attention to an area. So maybe there's an element of my quilt that's moving in that direction. I could definitely do that. Or I could have them all at the beginning and none at the end. It really depends on the quilt and the effect that you're going for. But this is a great way to just throw in a pop of texture here or there if you just want to try that out. Or if you're like, I love it, but not that much, you can definitely switch out between the two. And if you're learning a new filler, like this one is filled with the wishbone. Let's say you're learning the wishbone. This is a perfect way to practice because you have a defined area, it's little, you can quilt it and then move on. And then you'd be like, I'm not doing that again. Or maybe you do it again. And this is another example of kind of changing up the placement, having a lot more the wavy lines. There's no wood grains to this at all. It's just my wavy lines. And then a really dense filler, so those pebbles are really popping out. That's gonna show up a lot more. So just a slightly different look. Again, you could decide how you change up the placement or the arrangement, totally up to you, but I just wanna kind of encourage you to start thinking of different ways you can use this to highlight the areas on your quilt. All right, and like I said, most of this is from the expanded resource I put together. This is not something that will be for every video. There's some videos where maybe I feel like it's not necessary, but definitely with the wood grain, I knew that if I spent a little bit more time putting together, it might be helpful for you. So you can definitely check out the link in the description box below to see that. And it has 12 pages of pictures and more tips and some of the stuff I showed you just now. Okay, now this is not in the resource and this is not in the video, but this is for the long armers out there. Okay, so if you aren't a long armor, just bear with me for a few seconds. And if you are a long armor, but you're still newer, then don't worry about this. But for those of you that are like, okay, how do I apply this to a quilt? One of the biggest struggles of quilting on a long arm is that we're working in a horizontal motion. But sometimes, most of it will be perfect, but maybe I have this area where I want to quilt it vertically, but I don't want to advance the quilt. How do I quilt the wood grain so that they're in sections that hook together? Right? So, you know, in the video tutorial, I'm like, quilt all the way to the edge and travel and come back. Now I'm telling you, forget that. In this particular example, we're pretending I have an area that's too big and I don't want to have to advance. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to start working my way down an area, quilting my wood grain. The only difference is I'm going to always come back, right? So I went out, I quilted my arc, and then I echoed right back out the way I came, instead of continuing on, just like I did in the tutorial. So then I hit the edge and then I travel over. So I'm continuing, going, and then just bouncing right back. So you can see some of them are knots, some of them are just waves that go to a point and come right back. But the main thing here is I want to vary how long those are, because eventually when I come back and add my next section, I don't want to be noticeable or have that one line right down the middle. So some of them are going longer, some of them are shorter, but I'm always kind of just coming right back, leaving that other side unquilted. Then when I get to the end of my area, I have what looks like this. Now, it could look kind of like flames or something like that. But in this particular example, I want it to look like wood grain. I just want it to be quilted in chunks. So now I'm going to work my way back up the section and I'm going to quilt my lines so that they fill in those gaps in between. And so here you can see how I've started at the top. I've started adding some echo lines, filling it in, trying to keep that spacing consistent. And then when I'm done, it looks like this. Now, it's not going to look exactly like a wood grain, but it looks close enough that if there was wood grain over the rest of the quilt and I needed to do a section vertically, it wouldn't stick out. So again, if you're thinking, I have no idea what that's about, then just pretend I didn't say it. But if you ever get into a circumstance where you need to quilt that design and you don't have a whole throat space, you can definitely quilt it in sections and make it a little bit easier. So just thought I would throw that in there. Okay, one of the things I did this time's a little different is I designed one of the fabrics to look like the wood grain design, and it is designed continuous. You can quilt right along it like a training wheel. So I think training wheels for quilters is just such a fun name. And so this particular fabric is perfect for it. I will say it took forever. Oh, look. Oh, sorry. I forgot this. So this is a great question that came up. Let me back this up. See how that's a partial knot right there on the other side of my foot? The question was, how do you quilt a partial knot from the edge? So this is really good because if you start quilting and one side of your wood grain is up here and it's not even, quilting in partial knots will help it fill it in. So what I do is I just quilt my first point and then I travel and echo it on the inside. So it's kind of like it's cut off, but it's just traveling that's doing that. I said I would make a little video and I didn't realize it was right there. So back to my point. So that's what this week's giveaway is. It is a set of training wheels for quilters. It's going to be a piece of fabric with this print on it in the color of your choice, and then fabric for the backing and binding. And sometimes it just helps to have that line to quilt along. And when you're done, you have a pretty little whole cloth quilt that you can either give as a gift or hang on your wall and be super proud of. So to enter, all you have to do is click the link in the description box and just enter your name, and then I'll announce the winner next week during my live chat. And this is a picture of the dark pink one. The camera doesn't do the color justice. That peachy raspberry, blush color. It's so pretty. So that's this week's giveaway. Good luck. One lucky winner will get that. And another thing, before I come back and check out the questions, I did put out a thread placement suggestion. I know that some people wanted to know what thread colors go where. And so if you bought the coordinating thread kit and the panel and you want to put the threads in the same place I did, this is the one that I used, or this is the placement that I used. And there's a link to that in the challenge page. So it's, if you go down, it'll say learn more about the challenge, and it'll take you to where that is. So you can definitely download that if you like. If you want to pick your own color placement, perfect. This is just for those of you that wanted just a little bit more help with it. All right, so that's what I had to talk about the wood grain. I hope that, if nothing else, I haven't made it seem harder. I hope I made it seem a little easier for you. The most important thing is that you keep going and that you fill in all the area. And if consistency is key, then being consistently inconsistent is still fine. So even if your lines are really, really wavy, it's fine. If they're always like that, it's going to look great. If they're a little bit more smooth, it's fine. It's going to look great, I promise. And especially when you start doing this in an area like that, you will get a lot better at it the more you practice. All right, so a couple more questions. I kind of alluded to this, but I want to talk about just for a second, the leaning to a side. So it was on the, I think it was on the Facebook challenge group, but the question was, my lines tend to start angling over. Well, it could be a couple of things. And I said, well, is it maybe you're pushing too much on your dominant side? So this is something that I struggle with. Most of us have a dominant side, and it's a little bit easier to push, right? This arm's a little bit weaker. It can't keep up as much. So when that happens, you can just stop, kind of reposition and continue on. Or, I don't know if this will work, but I just had the thought, if you scoot over a little bit, maybe put a little bit more to your non-dominant side, you'll have a little more oomph behind it. So you can try that. But if you start quilting and you're like, oh, I don't like how it's angling, I promise it's fine. Promise it's fine. What you can do to fix that is travel along the edge, right? Go ahead and quilt another line and then fill in the area that you have left. So even you're going to have kind of like a triangular shape, but it's fine as long as it's filled in. And then some people also chatted on there, like there's some great, you can do like reference lines. You can mark out a couple of registration lines. You could mark out, you can do a couple of waves just to quilt and then fill it in. You don't have to mark it. You can just spread your wavy lines out, 12 inches or so, and then fill in between. So try not to be too discouraged. If it goes off to one angle, it's going to be fine. It's the spacing between the lines that's the most important. If there's no gaps, it's going to look beautiful. So very, very good. Do you need to turn the corner of the panel? I think I kind of talked about that, how all my lines are going one direction. You can turn the corner. It's just tricky, so I try not to do it. I'm pretty good at avoiding tricky stuff. And then, so why pointed wood grain? So I think I got all the questions on there. I'm just going to poke over here real quick in the live chat, make sure everybody's doing all right. Sometimes need to see the questions. Verna's looking for a place to enter the giveaway. When I'm done, there will be a description box below, and you'll click on that, and there's a link in there that says to enter the giveaway. Kathy, thank you. I love to be positive. It's so much fun. I mean, quilting is fun. We have more than enough stuff to worry about. Quilting should not be one of them. And so try to make it a lot of fun. Patricia said she missed the beginning of the chat. Darn it. Well, it will be on my YouTube channel. So if you're ever unable to make the live chat, no worries. You can go check it out on my YouTube channel. They're all there listed, previous live chats. And then I'm always here Thursday at 3 p.m. Central. So very nice. Kathy, it's not too late to order the fabrics and join in. We still have some panels left. Okay, here's a good question. Patricia said, what direction did I load the quilt on the long arm? I loaded it top down, just like all the graphics show it. So that big pink was at the section at the top and then over here to the side. But what happens is as I was working my way down, that means I have to kind of stabilize the center part. I know it's not ideal for those of you on a long arm, but you can use pins to stabilize it. You can do some basting stitches. I know it's one of the things about being on a long arm as opposed to on a sewing machine. All right. Okay. Janice says, I get trapped inside the knot. What am I doing wrong? You're probably not leaving enough room in between your lines to get back out. So as you're going, and I stop down here, I want to leave about 1/2 of an inch in between all my lines so that I can split the difference on my way out. But if you get to the center and you're like, oh crap, I can't get out, just work your way right out the middle and right onto the next side. So just like that variation where we had it closed off and we came from one point to the other, it's going to be the same idea. You're just going to come right out that point and continue on. And that's actually a variation of the design itself. So you could do that, but probably not leaving yourself enough room. Enough room will definitely do that. But don't get discouraged, just keep going. It's going to look fine. All right. I think that's it. So next week I am going to be talking about the leafy meander, but not just the leafy meander. We're going to see how to line it up to make a vine kind of shape. We're kind of add some detail, and we're going to tippy toe ever so slightly into thread painting. So whether you want to do something like an all over or you really want to add some detail in different shapes, you can definitely do that. It's going to be a blast. All right, well, if you've liked this video, I hope you give it a thumbs up and subscribe so you can know when all the challenge videos come out. And I'll be back next week, on next Wednesday, with a tutorial, and be back next Thursday with a live chat. So I'll kind of peruse through here and see if there's any questions I missed, and I'll try to address that during the next week's chat. Well, everybody, have a great week. Thank you so much for quilting along with me. I cannot wait to see our finished projects, and I'll see you next week. Until then, happy quilting.